Hi, folks. This is Keith.
This is Andy. Welcome to Brockton Bay.
Welcome to the Brockton Bay Chronicles, reviewing Worm by Wildbow. I'm here once again with my co-host and longtime friend Andy, discussing his first time reading of Worm. Andy, what's up for a review today?
We will be reviewing Arc 10, Parasite. And we do have some new business to cover this week. Looking ahead slightly, Arc 11 is extremely long, so we plan to break our review into 3 parts. Arcs 12 and 13 will once again be 2-part episodes. Also, this week we have a couple of questions to answer.
Yes, we do. We've got 2 questions and 2 comments. First, we'll start with the comments. From Reddit, we have a comment from I'm Very Bad at Math, and he says the following. I've been listening from the start. Love hearing the enjoyment along with all your thoughts and impressions as you go. Hearing another reader's experience, hearing another reader experience the hundreds of moments, small or large, is just plain fun. And with the backdrop of old school science fiction, fantasy expectations, it will be so interesting to hear how the subversions land. Good point. That's part of the reason I'm glad Andy agreed to do this little experiment that we're into. Next comment we have from YouTube, and that's from Psychic. And Psychic says, very late comment, but I'm loving this series. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on the rest of Worm. Well, welcome, Psychic. We're glad to have you on board with us. Next, we have our first question, and that's from YouTube, and that's from John DLR. And John asked the following question. With all the different powers displayed so far, what character's power would you choose as the best to have thus far? I can't really answer that question myself, knowing what lies ahead. But Andy, who do you think? What power do you think is the best with what we've covered so far in the story?
This is a little bit of a tricky question in that best in what context? You know, if you're talking about a battle, might be one thing. If you're talking about improving life for people, that might be another thing. If you're talking about being a criminal, that's a third thing. So I'm going to go with kind of a broader category to try to capture all of that. And I think my favorite category is Tinker.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's all the technology that's beyond what can be just manufactured or created that, you know, a Tinker can do over and above. I think that's pretty cool. And I'm not sure if the power that Dauntless had qualifies as Tinker or not, but I really like that as kind of a specific manifestation, if you will, that you could give additional power to objects. I could see that being really cool. You could set up a whole, you know, kind of like Bakuda did in that one episode with just weird bombs all over the place. You could set up a whole, you know, perimeter or whatever with all sorts of different objects that had powers added to them.
Right. Good question about Dauntless. Now you set my mind wondering, and I'm not sure. I'll have to check the wiki once we're done. Now I'm curious. I don't know if he'd be just a breaker or if he was a tinker. But anyway, good question from John, and we appreciate his contribution. Regular contributor Megafire7 has a question that he asked, but I think given the scope of the question, given the subject matter, I think that's best left for the end of our podcast when we get to your overall impression. So I'm going to save that question from Megafire till then. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
All right, and with all that out of the way, let's begin our point-by-point discussion. Arc 10, Chapter 1 picks up right where the previous arc ended, with the Undersiders and their captive. The Undersiders are making their way through the torn up dock area looking for a place to settle because they've got something they want to do with the prisoner that they have, Shadow Stalker. They've got a plan. What did you think of that whole scene? We get introduced to this person, Imp. They tie Shadow Stalker up in a chair, and then they commence to their little operation on her.
I really thought this was going to be just an interrogation or something like that. So I was a little taken aback with Regent and the stuff that was going on there until I remembered his dad and that he had similar powers. And so I was like, oh, okay, so that's what they're going to do. It was it was a very tense scene. You had the whole interaction with Bitch and Skitter, and the underlying animosity there. It's not so much underlying sometimes, and then them trying to find a good spot. Lots of abandoned buildings, so there's lots to choose from. But yeah, very gritty scene and kind of disquieting that you wonder what's going to happen next for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned the animosity between Bitch and Skitter, and that's pretty well set up by Wildbow. There's definitely, I mean, the team's back together, but we have this underlying tension between the two. Bitch is definitely at this moment we know she's not happy. We just don't know what transpired at this point. We don't know what transpired upon her return to the group.
Yeah, and it was kind of that way at the end of Arc 9, where it was like, oh, okay, well, Skitter's back with the gang, but how did this all come about? So there's definitely people, seems like the majority of the people have pretty big reservations about the whole thing, but Bitch is by far the most upset about it.
And staying with her for a moment, we see she's got new dogs with her. Angelica, the remainder of her original group of dogs, her best trained dogs, ripped to the others that we lost in the fight against Leviathan. But she's got Angelica. She's had to press in the service, plus several new dogs. Bentley being one of them, and I forget the name of the other couple ones. Sirius, if I'm not mistaken, was one that she also is brought down for this to use in this effort as they're getting ready to plan a mission against the PRT headquarters. But what did you think of Regent's use of his power? We saw where he was going. He was ultimately trying to take over Shadowstalker's nervous system. I mean, that's what he does. It's more than just making people trip upon occasion or spaz out some kind of way. Wildbow shows us that Regent's power is much, much more to it than that.
Yeah, he's definitely, his father's son, and he's got some amazing abilities there. It does take some time. He mentions it could take up, quite a range of time, up to a few hours, but it's pretty creepy what he can do, that's for sure. And yeah, you wonder what it's like being on the inside.
As the team secures Shadowstalker and they set her up, tied up in electrical cords and tied to a chair, she eventually comes back to consciousness and she sees the situation that she's in. At first, she's kind of nonchalant and like, yeah, okay, yeah, you got me, no big deal. What are you guys going to do with me? And then when she realizes what they're about to actually do, they're going to turn Regent loose on her. She loses her composure, and that hard edge seems to slip just a bit, don't you think?
For sure. And I think it would for anybody. It's kind of reminiscent a little bit of the scene from the Matrix, where they're trying to break into the mind of the head guy there, and Orpheus, and everybody's just, they're ready to just kill him basically, because if he's broken,
right,
who knows if he's going to be used, he's going to be worse than if he's alive. So I'm sure Shadowstalker's thinking, this is a fate worse than death almost.
Right. To become this guy's puppet, knowing his history, knowing his family history, whose father, who is his father, she's rightfully concerned. Everybody leaves Regent to begin his work trying to take over her nervous system. Then we see a little bit of an interesting interaction between Imp and Gru. Imp wants to have some kind of entertainment while they're waiting for this to finish and says, hey, let's watch TV. Hey, can we watch a movie? And Gru, being more assertive in his role as leader, is like, no, we can't do that. This whole building's supposed to be abandoned. She tries him and he has to, put her down a little bit. Interesting dynamic.
Definitely. And I was scratching my head over who Imp could be, and kind of had some ideas, and it seemed like things fell into place later on in the arc. But I think PETA might have been a better name for her than Imp. She was just pain in the.
Oh, yeah.
She was just trying to push every button on Gru, and so I was like, yeah, it seems like a little sister thing. But then I was like, well, what would have triggered her? She didn't have powers before.
No, that information comes a little bit later.
Okay.
After a little bit of time, we end up getting the results of Regent's efforts trying to turn Shadowstalker into a puppet, and he ends up being successful doing this, and has an interesting display, tricking the entire squad by having Shadowstalker tackle Taylor, then laughing it all off and demonstrating to the team that he's got control of Shadowstalker.
Typical Regent, always got to make a joke out of stuff. But the way Wildbow set it up, I was definitely thinking that somehow Shadowstalker had defeated the manipulation and gotten loose.
Oh, it freaked me out the first time I read
it. Definitely. Yeah, I was like, oh man, do the wards have something where they can block this kind of stuff? What's going on? So it was very well played by Wildbow.
Yes, most definitely. Hey, I want to jump back to the previous arc on a comment you made during the pursuit when Shadowstalker was pursuing Skitter, or actually when she was observing Skitter as she was departing from the truck, and she felt those bugs pass through her. And then you made the observation that Skitter seemed to be getting better about having passive observation post or using her insects more in a more observation way, like a radar about her. In this chapter of this arc, we see Skitter setting up webbing, using her insects to locate people in the building. What did you think of that improvement, elevation in her skill as far as passive observation?
Great point. And I think they touch on it a little bit later, kind of obliquely, but after all the things that have happened with the fallout from the attack, she's living in a shelter, and so I'm sure she's worried about anything that could happen. So, she's kind of at a very high level of being alert, and I'm sure that's helping her kind of fine tune things. But it was pretty amazing the way she did that, and it reminded me a little bit of Minority Report, where they send the kind of bug bots into the apartment building to try to track everybody, and then they see, oh, here's these two people arguing in an apartment, and oh, here's this person over here, and so that was pretty cool. It was a really neat visual that Wildbow created with that. Just basically tripwires on steroids over every entry to the building, plus tracking devices on anybody on either people on the roof, I think, or in the building. So that was pretty cool.
So moving on to chapter 2, we get a flashback, and this seems to be more of the traditional flashback that you see in a book or a movie. And we go 3 days ago, and we get a story told of how Taylor came to be back with the Undersiders. Lisa took her back to where the team was staying. This is after the Leviathan fight, and Lisa basically sponsored her to get the team to listen to her plea to return to the squad. Rachel was not happy. It had to be difficult, but good on Taylor for standing there and taking the physical assault, because that was going to happen one way or another. Rachel was going to physically attack her.
Definitely. Yeah. If you think about Rachel's dynamic, in a pack, if there's a member that turns on the others, then that one is, gone forever. There's no holds barred kind of thing. And so for her to allow it to happen, she definitely had to get out her aggressions and try to vent some of that. But you figure, I wondered, how much that was going to stick. It's easy for some people to forgive and forget. Some kind of betrayal like that is hard for anybody, but for somebody like Rachel, it's hard to imagine her doing it at all. But I think the scene went really well. Taylor was able to say her piece and say, yeah, I started out it this way, kind of changed things. Then I got upset about Dinah. Then I realized some things. So, I think I'm best with you guys, and I think I can help you guys. So we'll see how it goes.
Were you surprised that it was that Alec stepped forward? I guess you could say in her defense, it was more like him realizing the situation for what it was. Brian, as he said, was being a pain in the butt, and he was borderline almost impossible for the team to deal with. And having Taylor there as part of the team might be something that in the long term, they needed the firepower, and they were better off. He was the first one to say they were better off with her than without her. That kind of shocked you?
It did a little bit, but I think we'd seen a pattern with Alec where there was kind of a grudging respect, if you will, that, how is it that she's always the one that remembers that we should bring this along with us next time? How come none of us? And I think Rachel had mentioned that at one point too, and Tattletale said, yeah, but with Skitter, she actually takes it to heart.
Yeah, she follows through.
Adds that to her kid or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it made sense. Rachel's got the whole betrayal thing. Gru's got very mixed emotions about it, I'm sure. And then he's got his own stuff to deal with. As it turns out, Aisha's there.
Right. Surprise.
Which is kind of weird. Yeah, very surprised.
So,
but
all right, I may be jumping ahead, but when did you put 2 and 2 together on that? On Aisha
and Imp?
Yeah. Because I'm gonna be honest, yeah, I think I got through. I think I finished this entire. I think I had to ask Tony about it to be honest.
Oh,
I was so clueless. I think I missed it.
Yeah, so I really struggled with how back-talky she was to Gru in the first chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like, why would they put up with this? It's not like, she's Supergirl or something. She's Imp, obviously with a name like that, I wouldn't expect a powerhouse. So there's got to be something else. And then when she was in the backflash or the flashback, excuse me,
mm-hmm.
Then it was like, oh, okay. And I don't remember if they mentioned it here or not, but they mentioned because of the devastation that, the dad was gone, it seemed like, and their house was destroyed. And so it was like, well, okay, that meant Brian had to step up his thing. So she's there. But then I was like, oh, then I think it wasn't until the next chapter when they started going after PRT and she was there, Imp was there,
mm-hmm.
That I was like, okay, well, Aisha's there with them when they're civilians, and then Imp's there.
Yeah, she's asking for a vote. She's asking for a vote on whether or not Taylor got to return.
Yeah. So it seemed like she was definitely it was one and the same person. So
Okay.
I just don't know, like you said, and apparently comes later how she got her powers or what the trigger event was. But I'm guessing it was something to do with the attack, the Leviathan attack.
Okay. Yeah, I would think I was so focused on the relationship issue between Rachel and Taylor that the imp Aisha thing it went over my head. And like I said, I ended up later. I'm pretty sure I ended up texting Tony, and I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute, what? Who is this?" And he straightened me out on that. So anyway, Taylor says her piece, and Brian managing to work past his. We don't know because this is Taylor's point of view. We really don't know what goes into his thinking. Is he upset about the personal betrayal? Is he upset because he was having feelings toward her and had that whole thing blow up in their face, or is his anger strictly because of the betrayal of the Undersiders as a team? We don't see obviously what we can only speculate what's upset him the most.
I think Alec, kind of hit it on the head though that every leader needs a great lieutenant or a
Mm,
great foot soldier, to really bring a group together. You need somebody who's not only willing to obey, but to take stuff to heart and to incorporate it, to build on it, and to take initiative, to be a second in command, if you will. And it's not that Taylor tried to do that or push for that, but she provided a great example. She kind of moved into that role a little bit, if you will. And so I would guess that the biggest component is just that the betrayal to the team and how the team was going so smoothly with her there. And then, you know, with what they found out, then the team is worse off than it was before she started. So, but that's just me guessing.
after she comes clean and the team votes and they're 3-1 to let her return, Rachel is having none of it. She storms off and is rightfully upset. I mean, we have to acknowledge she lost what was it, either 6 or 8 of her dogs. Maybe not specifically because she tried to help Skitter, but she has now morphed that anger and is aiming it at Skitter. Never mind Leviathan. I lost my dogs because I tried to save you. You betrayed us, and now you suck, and I'm going to kill you when I get a chance. Is kind of where we are, and that's the dynamic we have underlying this team as they go in and assault PRT headquarters. So the flashback is over, and we get now. The team is actually on a mission to set themselves up to get captured by Shadowstalker to begin their infiltration. Kind of an interesting dance they set up to setting up the chess pieces in order to make this thing happen.
You can definitely see the hand of Coil in all of this, similar to, oh well, we'll put on the uniforms of the guards that we jumped, and then everybody will think we're on the rebel side or whatever, the Nazi side, and then we'll be able to sneak in. In this case, they've got somebody that's under mind control. So it's not even somebody in disguise. This is the real deal. So pretty pretty audacious plan, and even more audacious target. I mean, best to hit them when everybody's disrupted, but I don't know. I'm sure, Coyle talked to Dinah and rolled the dice and figured out this was a pretty good outcome. And
Worth the risk.
exactly. Yeah. So off we go to see the wizard.
Yeah, that's it. So their plan was to loot or to fight a bunch of looters, have Shadowstalker come in and tranquilize them, quote unquote, capture the Undersiders. And have Shadowstalker call for PRT soldiers to come pick them up, and thus began their entree into the into the headquarters. Oh, and what was cool was one of the PRT soldiers when they arrived with the van and they were going to load them into the van. He wanted to foam the Undersiders, and Alec through Shadow Stalker said, hey, no, we don't need to. They're tranquilized. Hey, don't bother. I'm tired. I don't want to stick around while you get the solvent to dissolve the containment foam. Just throw them in there. That was pretty slick how they managed to have Alec manipulate her to make that happen, and not the worst case for them would have been to have them in containment foam rather than just having them secured with plastic cuffs.
Definitely. It's amazing that no matter what processes and what steps you put in place, what safeguards you put in place, it always comes down to the human element. And if somebody is willing to flex or kind of throw their weight around to force the rank and file to bypass process, then it all goes out the window. And so sure enough, the parahuman, is able to kind of dominate over the non-parahumans, and they're like, okay, well, she's bad enough mood already. No need to get her more upset.
Yes. And so the PRT guys, as they're loading the Undersiders onto the van, some of them are talking to the witnesses, and the witnesses, the looters, they sell the story that the Undersiders wanted. So the team gets hauled off to PRT headquarters. And here we have a scene with Weld. Hey, he's definitely in command now. And he recognized, he's the first one to spot the problem with Shadow Stalker, knowing that, what was it? Regent is one of the highest, if not the highest class master in Brockton Bay. He wasn't for taking any chances, and he spots the trap right away.
I think Wildbow did a good job of kind of drawing it out. I mean, there were a number of ways that could have been tripped up, and they had planned for those. Tattletale had drilled Regent on what answers would needed, like the password and
right,
and what other things might come up. But then finally says, well, remember what you did to that other member? And Shadow Stalker / Regent tries to play it off like, hey, don't keep, trying to mess with me and everything. Yeah. And then finally, Alec just has to guess and guesses wrong. And then, the trap is sprung. And then we get into the big fight.
That was pretty good job by Wildbow, because Tattletale figuring out the passcode was cool, and you're thinking, hey, they're going to be all right. And then, well, why'd you, Shadow Stalker, you can't get away with attacking a clock blocker, and then Regent has to guess. I'm like, no, it's not clock blocker. Well, who was it? Well, it was Vista, and she said someone else, and Kidwin, whoever. And nope, wrong. Weld recognizes it. And like you said, the battle is on. And here we get another epic fight scene, close quarters combat, and we get to see Imp in action. This is, I'm sure the listeners will let me know if I'm wrong. I think this is the first time we see someone with a stranger power in action, and that's what Imp is. She has a stranger capability.
And that's where things started to get kind of weird, because, I thought I kind of knew what was going on, that, okay, Aisha is Imp, but then every other sentence, it seemed like Skitter was like, who was this person how did I get over here?
And that was
what was
messing
that
with
thing
me
with the knife?
Wow, dig that one up, do you? Yeah, and that was really good by Wild. Wait a minute, what's going on here? What's this Imp person doing? So that was pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an unexpected curveball, and at times I was almost wondering if there was a typo or something, because this just seems weird. We all just read, this is what happened in this sentence, and then in the next sentence, Skitter's like, what happened?
Yeah, you've got this one sentence where it says, the girl with the horns was on our side. Wait, I could almost remember her. Some relation to Gru. And that's how this is going on early in the chapter while Imp is out there tasing people and causing them problems.
Yeah.
What did you think of Skitter turning her bugs into chemical weapon delivery systems?
Wow.
I mean,
Well, I
seriously, come
guess,
on.
well, I thought back to when she had the caterpillars dipped in Newt's
Neuter.
saliva or neuter's secretions, and then, they took out lung. And so I was thinking back to that and thinking, well, it's not that much of a leap.
Mm.
It makes sense, but I was like, dang, that's cold blooded right there. I mean, it's bad enough getting a wasp sting. I've had one time.
Mm-hmm.
It was not pleasant, but I can't imagine having it coated in pepper spray. That's just nasty.
I mean, the rotting off of lungs junk was unintentional, and this, I mean, yeah, she's turned her bugs into a chemical weapon. I'm sorry, that's all it is to it. She figured it out. It
Exactly.
was accidental how she came about it, but more power to her, I guess. I mean, it was effective
I
as all get
I
out.
guess. Yeah. Yeah. You wonder, I don't know. Yeah, that could turn into something really bad. But yeah, that way she doesn't have to carry that many. It's not like she needs hundreds of thousands of bugs, as long as she's got bugs on roids, kind of, so to speak.
As the team breaks their restraints and attempts to charge into the headquarters toward their ultimate goal, Gru gets tagged by Clock Blocker. And that was kind of a oh my god kind of moment for me.
Well, yeah, given that you don't know how long that freeze is going to last, that definitely puts a crimp in things. They've obviously got some kind of timeline in mind. It's like typical response. This is going to take this long. This is going to take that much longer. But now it's like, oh, well, who brought the forklift or the hand trolley for Gru to take him out too? So yeah, that threw a monkey wrench into everything, and it wasn't sure how that was going to work out.
So the team's goal is to get access to some computers so that they can steal some information. They end up fighting their way toward the elevators, getting the elevators, take them downstairs. Poor Vista has been taken out by the bugs. Flechette's been taken out by the bugs. Kid Win tries to put up a fight with his kind of a flying taser kind of thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, that was almost the is that not the realization of an idea that he talked about having in the previous arc?
Oh, I don't remember that, but
Hovering pistols or something like that that could am
oh,
I misremembering that? I may be wrong.
that sounds familiar. Yeah.
He puts up a little bit of a fight. To his credit, Weld is a good being a good leader, and he's in the fight trying to keep the Undersiders from achieving their mission. The team gets downstairs. Tattletale, Regent, Imp, and Skitter head downstairs. They're in the wards, one of the wards' computer rooms, and she begins copying the information that they want from the network until they're interrupted by Dragon. That takes us on into chapter 4. Dragon shows up on the computer screen and it's like, you're not going to be able to do this.
It's kind of surprising to me that they'd be able to put any kind of USB in and copy anything. I mean, at my work, we have to get special permission to do that, and we're not, secure or anything. So I get that it's inside of a secure facility, but you'd think you need the supervisor's code or whatever, like at the retail store. Hey, I got to do a void on a transaction kind of thing. You don't want just anybody doing that. So I thought, well, of course, you know what? This is written 10 years ago. So things have gotten tighter since then. That's a good point. But yeah, I thought they were going to get away with everything there for a while until Dragon, yeah, does the
Yeah, exactly. And Tattletale commences to trying to do her thing and getting under dragon skin, which we find out later on is actually kind of impossible. But good interaction between these two, back and forth for a little bit. Dragon shuts down the power, shuts down the computers. They see that the jig is up. Imp and Regent begin trying to hack their way out of the room that they're locked in. Tattletale and Skitter go off to Kid Wynn's room and start trying to find something to use as a weapon to get their way out of past the door that's been shut on them.
That was a real interesting interaction, I think, because I thought Tattletale did get under Dragon's figurative skin a little bit by mentioning the Dragon Slayers and her losing a suit of armor, and that did seem to be a sore spot. But then Dragon also says it's not a good idea to play around with Tinker Toys. I don't know. It seems like it worked out okay, but there are definitely some drawbacks to it. You don't know what's going to happen, and or how often something's going to work. So, but I like that interaction a lot. That was a neat scene, the way they had that. Well, Dragon, you let your stuff slip. We're just doing the same thing the Dragon Slayers are doing, and she's like, "Oh, fine, then go ahead, see what happens."
Yeah. I mean, on the surface, the idea, the warning from Dragon is a valid one, but yeah, Tattletale, as you noted, Tattletale pointed out how she got beat by the Dragon Slayers, and so nanny boo boo. Anyway, one of the guns is effective at blasting them out of the ward's team room area that they were in, and they start trying to head upstairs because the elevators are out. And Regent through Shadowstalker is realizing that the battle upstairs is not exactly going the way that they want. Now, keep this in mind. If you think about it, Regent's downstairs helping them while he's at the same time having Shadowstalker upstairs fighting Weld and the other wards who are still mobile and any PRT soldiers. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive.
And you hear more about it later on in the arc, but yeah, it's almost like there's a proximity thing that makes it a little easier. And then, but yeah, I was wondering how he was doing that too. I was switching back and forth, and because Shadowstalker was in there, but they do make a point in there, I think, where it's like sometimes the most effective combat is when you don't worry about whether you get hurt or not. You just kind of go wild, and you knew that the wards had to hold back because one of their prime directives is not to kill people. That's a huge PR nightmare if the kind of the law enforcement folks are killing folks. It looks really bad. So they're trying to subdue them with as little harm as possible, and that works against them quite a bit.
Yeah, and keeping in mind, knowing that that Shadowstalker is being controlled, Weld is not out to hurt her. So that kind of hampers what he can or can't do when she comes to assault him physically. I can't find it right now, but there was that one moment where Regent's grasp on Shadowstalker started to slip slightly, and she says, "Help me," to Weld. That was chilling. I mean, we know she's in there. We know that he's controlling her, but for that very brief moment, she lets out that "help me" kind of whimper, and that's kind of like, ugh.
Yeah, that was, and that's the whole thing, is that you have, at least in other stuff I've read, you've got one mind, I guess, kind of shoving the other one down,
Mm-hmm.
almost like you would you would dunk somebody and hold them under in the pool. But yeah, every once in a while that person wriggles out for a minute, gets a little bit of air, but it's really kind of sickening to think of what it must be like to be the person being held under the whole time.
Yeah. And so Dragon arrives on scene. She had gone silent when we thought that Tattletale had gotten under her skin, but in actuality, she was firing up one of her suits and was heading swiftly to Brockton Bay with that suit. And as the team was upstairs, Gru is still under clock blockers, time stasis, and so they're hoping that breaks free. He breaks free soon, and Dragon shows up with one of her suits, and the battle is joined. It's their situation is even more dire now.
Yeah, and I really I didn't see any way out. I was assuming that it was going to be another one of those. Coyle had another team waiting and was going to have them, come in and kind of save the day. But I think I had a misconception about the foam. And looking back on it, it was I hadn't really thought it out. I assumed it was like the stuff you use, like the spray insulation, that you use to fill a crack with or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever used that, but you touch the trigger for a second and you cover like a foot of wall. It expands so fast. And so I was thinking of it that way. But if it worked that way, then that would swallow up good guys and bad guys all at once. It'd be very hard. You'd fire a couple of things of it, and then the whole room would be full of foam, and everybody'd be frozen. And so that's not very good from a tactical standpoint. So it had to be more directed and more, maybe as it clings to a person, it kind of expands upward on them rather than just outward in all directions kind of thing. I don't know, but
yeah, I'm not sure now that you mention it. Yeah, I think you eject it from the canister, and if you're covering somebody's feet with it, then it kind of expands on them. I'm not sure about that, how that would look. I mean, it's tacky, and it's once you're in it, you're screwed. We get several demonstrations of that. Earlier on, Wildbow had written where Flechette was deliberately puncturing some of the canisters to limit where the Undersiders could move. She was flinging some of her darts into them and poking holes to them, and that poking holes into the canisters of the containment foam, and that was erupting all over the place and limiting where the Undersiders could go. So they came back upstairs into the receiving area of the building, but the place there wasn't a lot of room to maneuver in. And now that Dragon's here, the situation, like I said earlier, is even more dire.
Yeah. I guess I was just thinking of it, like I said, that they, 3 or 4 canisters would fill the room, whereas it was probably more like it would make like like an ottoman size chunk or whatever.
Gotcha.
That if you touched it, you were stuck to it, kind of thing. So you could maneuver around it like furniture in a room, but it still, it required navigation. It required you being careful. So
okay,
but Dragon's got 4 spray nozzles, I guess, that are going at different people, and it's not looking good, because with that many foam throwers, if you will, going, it's you're bound to get stuck somewhere.
Yes, and Skitter's trying to use her bugs in a pretty creative way, which has little to no effect. Gru ends up coming out of his time stasis and is freaked out. It's like, oh my god, Dragon's here, Oh geez, well of course he's going to be freaked out, because he just came from being frozen, only to see this big mech suit outside fighting its way in, trying to get at him. Bitch has got her dogs on site, and they're battling as best they can. And meanwhile, Weld is doing what he can to keep the Undersiders from escaping. Imp, and we'll see here. This moves us on into chapters 5 and 6. Imp against Tattletale's recommendation goes out. It doesn't realize that Dragon can track her, and goes out and tries to do something, and Dragon is relaying her location to Weld via earbud, and Weld is swinging back and forth wildly and almost catches her.
Yeah, definitely the young person of the group thinking, "Oh, I know better than they do. I'm just going to jump right in," and the veteran, battle-hardened folks saying, "Hold on, that's a bad idea," and then it almost costing him, getting taken down. But her luck holds on that one.
Yeah, Tattletale says, "Dragon can see you, you twit." She's relaying directions to Weld. Tattletale shouted at our new member. So Tattletale asked her, "What did you think you were going to accomplish?" And Imp's like, "I could have figured something out." Imp pouted. You can just imagine. I forget how old is Aisha. She's like 14, I think. I could have figured it out. I mean,
exactly.
Anyway, so the team ends up figuring their way out. Gru and let's see here. I forget who escapes first, but Tattletale and Skitter and Alec, I want to say, end up going into the bookshop to try to evade Dragon. Her mech suit is so large, it's filling up most of the entire area, and she's got him pinned down. Tattletale, her power giving her some good information. Tattletale takes one of the guns that she had been using and sets it to overload and flings it out there, knowing that eventually Dragon is going to have to do something about it. As the efforts to escape continue, Bitch does Skitter dirty and knocks her into the containment foam. Again, this goes back to this whole underlying tension between the group. Not cool, right?
Definitely not cool. But I want to skip back a little bit. I thought it was interesting the way that Tattletale managed to jam the gun by using a mannequin from the gift shop to like hold the trigger down. I was like, what? I didn't know what. All of a sudden they're talking about a mannequin, and I'm thinking, what are they going to throw it at Dragon and it's going to think it's somebody? I didn't know what was going to happen there. And then when Skitter gets bumped, she's not sure how that happened.
Right.
And like you were saying, you got a 10 by 10 room with 9 by 9 of that taken up with people and foam and stuff. And so who knows? But then, she realizes, oh, wait a minute. There was somebody who wanted to get me. And she just sailed out the window with her dog. So
stopped to look back at me. Before we get to that, this one line where the team is making a break for it, and Skitter's looking at her options, and she says here, "So I did something risky and borderline stupid. I lunged forward and stepped onto the metal foot of Dragon's armored suit, like Regent had been planning to do until he discovered it was electrified." No, Skitter, it wasn't borderline stupid. It was stupid. It was insane. You didn't know whether or not you're going to get electrocuted. I can't, this girl. I mean, I thought it was I don't know if it an unnecessary risk, but it was stupid. I thought that she took that chance.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can't imagine that with all the other armaments and stuff that Dragon has going on. I mean, Dragon's got, what is it called? The solution that breaks down the containment foam.
Oh, the retardant. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like oozing out of her pores or something so that she doesn't get stuck in it as she's generating, which is, great design on the suit. So who knows what else is going on. And I'll just step on that foot. I'm sure nothing bad will happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, but she saw that it was electrified, whether it was from Dragon's suit itself or from the electric gun that Tattletale had flung out there.
The lightning gun.
Yes, and the circuit, Dragon was part of the circuit, and for Skitter to take that chance, I I wasn't a fan of it, but you know, she pulled it off. The suit, her costume insulated her, and everything was looking cool till, like we said, bitch decided to get payback and knocked her into the foam. And I, at that point during my first read, I thought she was caught. I thought, well, good grief, what happens now? But I was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think it says something like she's face down or her whole arm's pinned.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else has got ghosts, so I was thinking she was in bad shape. Yeah, but Tattletale had that last trick up her sleeve. So
Yeah, and it turns out that Dragon's priority to protect life meant that she couldn't let the gun overload, explode, and kill Skitter. So she had to use her body to protect her. Before her suit was destroyed, Dragon's like, hey, where are your friends taking this data? I've got you pinned down here. They left you. You owe them no loyalty. And Skitter's like, I'm not telling you anything. I don't know where they're going. So Dragon's effort to get her to turn on her friends didn't succeed.
yeah, yeah, that was an interesting turn of events there. And Dragon's got a lot of intel and has been following a lot of things. And so you can see her trying to kind of do similar stuff to Tattletale, get people to think about stuff and that kind of thing. But yeah, it doesn't work.
And
I
so
don't know if
go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to move us on into chapter 6. The
Okay, yeah, we gotta pause before we move. There's one very important thing here, and that's when Dragon's suit blows open.
Oh yeah. Go right ahead.
Um, so Regent had thought there was a person inside the suit. The dragon was inside the suit. And so after Dragon muffles the explosion of the lightning gun, the suit is destroyed. Skitter is able to escape. She takes a minute to look, and there was something in the suit of armor. I'm reading from the thing here. It looked like a fetus. The features were crude, barely humanoid in any sense of the word. It turned to look at me, it says in the next paragraph, then made a low mewling sound. And then the whole suit melted down.
Right.
And the fetus blackened and was destroyed. That was a stunner. I I didn't know what to think at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'd communicated my suspicions about Dragon
Mm-hmm.
in earlier episodes, but then this came out. I'm like, what in the actual heck is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is just, I mean, is it? I didn't know what to think. I was stunned.
Yeah. No, Wildbow drops
But then Wildbow doesn't really give us any time to think about it. He moves us on. But what were you going to say? He drops what?
he drops bombs like that throughout this thing. And
Okay.
so yeah, and as you noticed, yeah, you don't get time to breathe until later. You'll have a chance to come back and kind of, it may come back and you can kind of dissect what it was that happened at that moment. But plenty of jaw dropping moments like that to come. So yeah, Skitter looks at it and says, what am I looking at here? And when a suit blows up, that's the end of whatever it was she saw there. So yeah,
right.
So we move on to chapter 6. The team makes their escape, and Skitter is going to get some retribution from Bitch.
And if anyone deserves to get it, I would say it's Skitter dealing it into Bitch, because sure, it's one thing to feel betrayed and to want revenge and that kind of thing, but to throw somebody into the jaws of the monster on your way out the door, that's pretty low budget even for Bitch. So I'm right with Skitter on that one there.
Yeah, and she's all in. I think that phrase has been used a couple times, describing her commitment to this life of villainy now. And in her confrontation with Bitch, she says, "You did what I almost did and backed out of." And Taylor confronts her, pops her with her baton, holds the baton in her mouth, hisses at the rest of the Undersiders and tells them what happened here. But then in the end, she turns it around and says, "Look, you screwed up, I screwed up. It's over. This ends now, and we're going to be teammates, whether you like it or not. I'm going to, in the future, I'm going to have to put myself in a position where you can screw me over, because it's the only way this team work is if we have trust in each other in dire situations." And she's right.
It's very tough situation for sure, and it's pretty admirable how Skitter handles it. I don't know if the shock of seeing Dragon kind of disrupted her full on vengeance, or what, but she definitely kind of holds back a little bit what she could have done,
Mm-hmm.
and realizes, yeah, there's still what's important is the good of the team. I was crappy, you were crappy, we're even now, and if you don't agree, then try it again, and I'll be ready,
Yeah, mess around and find
and you'll
out,
be
kind of
sorry.
thing.
Exactly.
She had the presence of mind to have Regent move Shadowstalker away from the team while this is our business and we're going to have this discussion. And that's where Skitter told Bitch, "Hey, look, I'm going to move past this. You need to move past this," and then went even a step further and said, "Hey, look, I'll continue to come help you with your dogs. I'm willing to be your friend, take it or leave it," kind of thing. And I mean, Rachel's dealing with canine psychology. I mean, that's overriding most of her I don't know, her social interactions. And so I bet that seeing Taylor extend this hand to her, it does not compute in this sense. Am I thinking that through right?
Definitely. So in a previous arc, Taylor offered the olive branch to Rachel. Rachel was like, "That's just talk. It's cheap, whatever." But then Taylor followed through and did help out, and seemed to build somewhat of a rapport there. And so, looking back at that example, to Rachel, or to Bitch, the talking is just talking.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a dog barking in a yard, right? It's just barking. It could be anything, but most of the time it's nothing. You know, they heard they heard a loud noise. They heard something, whatever. It's meaningless, and it doesn't change the past. Once bitten, twice shy kind of thing. So Bitch is like, "Fine, you dominated me. All right, you're not you're not a pushover. Okay, yeah, I might be the weak one, but that's again, like you said, kind of trying to play human psychologist
Mm-hmm.
on kind of an animal mentality." And it's like, well, yeah, like you said, it doesn't compute, it doesn't add up. So Bitch is just like, "Well, I'll just leave then. Fine,
Right.
whatever."
Yeah. Let me ask you to put on your prognostication hat. So we've seen this relationship between Taylor and Rachel over these 10 arcs now. Looking forward, do you want to speculate on their relationship? I mean, do they become friends, or is it just they tolerate each other?
Well, that's given my vast experience with sci-fi and fantasy, and somewhat with comic books.
Mm-hmm.
You always have to have a protagonist, and as we're going to see here in a little bit, Shadowstalker is pretty much done being the protagonist, and so my prediction is that Bitch will be the new protagonist. That there'll be continued more cunning attempts to undermine things and continued strife and tension until the point where bitch does something else stupid, and then one of them's going to get taken out. And since this is about Skitter, I'm guessing it's going to be bitch.
Okay. All right. Let's let's see what happens and where things develop between those two going forward. So this settles, but this tension between this confrontation between bitch and Skitter ends. The team decides they need to take their data onto Coil. Regent, quote unquote, releases Shadow Stalker, and we come back to that in a little bit. And the team heads on to take the information to Coil, where once they meet up with him, and he asks, they turn the hard drives over to Coil. Excuse me, the thumb drives over to Coil. You pop them in a laptop, and he begins looking up information on the Slaughterhouse 9. And that takes this in a whole new direction.
Yeah, boy, things got pretty dark pretty fast here.
Oh, can I interrupt you for a second?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And just say once again, I hate the description of how Dinah is treated. This thing is really disturbing.
Oh man, it's so creepy. And you know, kudos to Wildbow for being able to write it,
yeah,
to engender that emotions.
So my skin
in
crawls.
His readers, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't. It's just really messed up. But yeah, he starts going through this. They talk about what data he wants, and it's this Slaughterhouse 9 group, which apparently is only 8 because
something happened.
They sometimes
to
slaughter each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
They apparently do whatever they want because they're all basically psychopathic mass murderers. So
exactly. I think at one point it says the Slaughterhouse 9 was they were the kind of people who would descend on a school and slaughter everybody there because they could. How did you the weirdness and the disturbing imagery of Dinah aside, how did you like how all this information was presented? The introducing of the members of the Slaughterhouse 9. Did you think this was an effective way to perform this? Again, I don't want to call it an information dump, but to get all this data to us.
I think so. I think he's used this pattern before with some of the other groups. The scene in the bar comes to mind when the different criminal elements were trying to kind of decide who's going to do what and have their confab. But it was kind of overshadowed for me by, although the part about Siberian kind of freaked me out.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I mean, she'd taken on the triumvirate on a dozen occasions and was still around to quote unquote talk about it because she didn't talk, but she was still around.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not superhero material, but I can't imagine going through all the stuff that Skitter went through and seeing the little fetus thing and the dragon armor and everything, and almost getting trapped because her friend betrayed her or her teammate betrayed her, and all this stuff, and then having to like process and analyze all this data. I would have been like, you know what? I just need to chill for a while. I'm going to put on my headphones. You guys do whatever you need to do. But
exactly, man.
But yeah, I thought it's hard to get a lot of information across quickly in this kind of form. But I envisioned like when you go on LinkedIn and you see a bunch of people that you might know, and it gives you a little blurb under each picture, works with you at this point, or you went to NAU at about the same time or whatever. So I was kind of envisioning it that way with a little bit more background from what Skitter or Taylor knew about them. But that was all overshadowed by what, where, Dinah buries the lead, so to speak.
God. Yes. That's the good way to put it. Yeah. All of a sudden It's him. Who? She pointed at the screen at Jack Slash. Him. You're going to have to explain it to us, Pet. What about him? He's the one who makes everyone die. What? I mean, yeah, it's bad enough. Skitter's thinking, my God, is Coyle going to hire these people? It goes from that to the world's going to end. What are you talking about?
Well, and we just saw the devastation to the city, and you figure, well, that's about as bad as it's going to get, right?
Sure.
And then, oh no, yeah, this guy's going to kill everyone. Like, what? Hold on, one psychopath? How's that going to work? And then they keep digging into it, and it just gets worse and worse.
Right. So Tattletales determines that Jack himself isn't going to end the world, but he's the catalyst for something. And I gotta be careful how I speak here because I know what's going to happen. So he's the catalyst for something. Everybody's shook up. Coyle tries to get a little more information from Dinah. She gives him various percentages. Can the travelers kill him? Will they be successful? How many of the travelers will die? Can the undersiders do it? The travelers, being the more powerful team, Dinah reports that they have a greater chance of succeeding. The undersiders' chances against the Slaughterhouse Nine are so bad that Coyle's like, look, if you run into these people, run. Don't try to fight them, cede any territory. Don't, if you're in the middle of a job, forget the job, save yourselves, kind of thing. Because I'd rather have you alive than trying to complete a mission and these guys show up. So the Slaughterhouse Nine are in Brockton Bay. They haven't made themselves necessarily seen just yet, their presence known, but it's bad. Oh yeah, and Gru prompts Coyle and says, I think we ought to let the heroes know about this, about the end of the world stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's a great point, but it's hard to know how that would work. And Coyle definitely hedges his bets and says, "I'll look into it."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, oh gosh. Yeah, that's a very Coyle answer. That is a
Yeah.
very Coyle answer. So Coyle gives the laptop and the thumb drives to his computer guy and is like, I think it would be a good idea for you guys to do your best to get us information as soon as possible. Lose sleep if you have to. And as I said before, everybody's shook up on this, and anything after going forward is not going to matter much. But Coyle continues with his plans and talks to the undersiders and lays out his idea for having them control various territories around the Brockton Bay area. What did you think of that? Having them each set up a fiefdom? Is that the appropriate way to look at this?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to phrase it. I think it fits with Coyle's modus operandi. He needs trusted lieutenants to delegate things to,
Mm-hmm.
and he's kind of figured out a way to set up these fiefdoms, as you called it, and have somebody in charge of it. And he's even gone so far as provide henchmen for some of the folks. So it seems to make sense. It is. I go along with the feeling though that it's kind of unsettling that they're not going to be together as a group. It sounds like Tattletale's kind of the hub that the other folks are going to rotate around, but they're not going to be together, which seems pretty disquieting.
I was disappointed when I read that the first time. I was definitely along with in Skitter's mindset where, hey, the team just reunited in a manner of speaking, and now they're going to separate. I was pretty disappointed about that.
I guess though, trying to put an author hat on, even though I'm not an author really. Well, what would be the alternative? Would you just have the Loft season 2 kind of thing where,
Mm.
except it's more tense? Maybe Coyle played this out and said, well, things are better, but they're not healed. So if they're all there in a room together or a loft together, it's more likely that things are going to get worse. They still need more time to rebuild trust or something. And this is a way they can stay together with missions, but they're not living in the same space. I don't know.
No, I think that again, I'm less of an author than you are. I think that it was part of uh, Coyle's deliberate plan all along to have them set up their independent territories. I was just speaking from the terms of just the disappointment of them not being able to be together and flesh out those remaining hostilities between the two, between Rachel and Taylor, and can Grew or Brian and Taylor repair their friendship. Is just more of a disappointment. But I think that as part of a strategy, this is where Coyle was going to go all along. At least that's how I took
Gotcha.
it.
That makes sense.
So after divvying up their assignments to their locations, he dismisses the team. Skitter asks if she could stay back and talk to him, and they have a deeper discussion about how Coyle found out about her or knew about her plan all along. Skitter approaches Coyle with this idea of letting Dinah go, and ultimately, how to phrase this, I'll be I'll be your slave. Just let this girl, when you're done capturing the city, when you're done with whatever you want to do, please let her go, and I'll be your girl. I'll work for you harder than anybody. I'll do whatever you need. Just please consider this. That was kind of gut wrenching there. She's making a deal with the devil.
That's a great way to put it. I had thought of it in that terms, but there were inklings in the earlier parts of the arc that she was kind of thinking, in order to fix this, I've got to be on the inside and I've got to be part of Coyle's organization. And that was, leading up to this. How do I get Dinah out? And this is her gambit to try to get that to work. But it is, I mean, I think of all those movies and books where it's like, oh well, yes, when I'm done with her, she'll be free, and then the
Mm-hmm.
way she's free is that they kill her. Now she's released from this pain and suffering of this world. It's like, well, no, that's not what I meant.
Right.
So it's kind of like get it in writing, triplicate, store it in a safe deposit box. But it sounds like this is at least the best. And Taylor's done a great job on other occasions of trying to really nail down and make deals that'll be kind of airtight. And so hopefully this one will turn out okay. But with Coyle, you never know.
Yeah. So wait and see. Wait and see. And with that, we move on into interlude 10, Alec. And this is where we find out that that Regent did not, in fact, let Shadowstalker go. She was never really free. That whole display of her dropping to her hands and knees and then pointing the crossbow at Alec and then him pretending to regain control. It was all a ruse on his part.
Pretty brilliant. And I mean, yeah, this whole chapter is very disturbing, but in retrospect, Regent, while he's in her mind or controlling her and sensing what she's thinking and that kind of thing, he's got to know that she's never going to go for anything.
Right.
There's never going to be. He can sense the resolve in her, or whatever, the flaming desire for revenge or whatever. And so he decides, no, I've got to have a more permanent solution to this. But man, oh man, is this just nightmarish the way this goes?
We get not a full origin story for reading, but we do get a little bit of as Alex doing some self reflection. He's wondering if his father broke him, and then we get a emotionally, and then we get a description of a scene from his life at home when he was much younger, and how his father, the kids were throwing a fit, and one of his father's girlfriends was trying to calm him down, and dad came out of the room and infused each of them with stark terror. And then Alec didn't talk for like 3 months after that. What definitely wasn't Ozzie and Harriet there.
Oh my gosh, I guess not. It was also interesting there that it seemed like Alec was already showing his power at age 8. Is that how you read that too, or
Not specifically sometime after that, but I didn't take that at that point, that when he was 8, unless I missed something.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it here
The fight
quick.
with his
But I
sisters,
thought,
the fight with his sisters was over trying to watch a TV show, and he threw a fit. It was later where he talked about controlling individuals. Well, was there an actual age mentioned, or was it just as part of his backstory, generally speaking, where he would control people and did various things, experienced drugs and other things through his puppets? I'm not sure there was a specific age attached to that.
yeah, no, I was thinking of the time when he was 8 and fighting with his sisters because they wanted to watch TV, and then he'd thrown a tantrum and started screaming.
Mm-hmm.
I think I read into that his screaming somehow forced them or manipulated them to give
No,
in,
no,
because
no,
it
no,
said
no.
the entire atmosphere in the house had changed. But I think everybody was so scared of what the father was going to do that
Exactly.
they're like, oh, that probably woke him up. Okay, I get it. My bad there.
Yeah, which is why the girlfriend was trying to put a hand over his mouth,
Cover
going,
his
"Shh,
mouth.
please
Yeah.
don't, be quiet, be quiet."
Don't wake him up.
And it was too late. And yeah, dad came out the room, and jeez, yeah. So Alec is broken some kind of way. Anyway, he sends Shadowstalker on her way and makes use of her power, and we get descriptions about how he is able to experience her going into her shadow state, appreciating the physical condition she's in as an athlete, and then he commenced to destroying her life. He's angry, or how does he put it? He's angry that he doesn't actually feel more sorry for Taylor, I believe it was, but he digs in Shadowstalker's. He's going to take revenge for Taylor, and he digs in Shadowstalker's phone, starts sending out text, basically lining up how guilty she is of bullying Taylor. Calls Emma and sets up a pretext for her becoming an emotional wreck. Pretty conniving stuff that he was doing there.
I don't know if he had thought it all out ahead of time, or if he's had experience with this kind of thing back when he still hung out with his dad and seen how his dad operates. But yeah, this is pretty draconian what he goes through to make sure that all the bridges are burned,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing left for her. So yeah, feel vengeful all you want, but you're a total pariah now if you're going to be alive.
Yeah.
For a while there, it looked like that there wasn't going to even need to be a worry about her crossing
Right.
paths again.
Right. I mean, yeah. You get halfway through the chapter, and you're wondering, I mean, is he gonna kill her? I was back and forth.
Yeah,
Is he? No, he's not. No. So he played it pretty well. He got his point across about leaving Taylor alone and leaving the city, I should say. He takes Shadowstalker and takes her back to her home, and there's that whole scene there. This poor beleaguered mom.
oh my gosh.
Yes, something happened with someone that she had been involved with, and I'm guessing that that's what triggered Shadowstalker. That something happened with some. For we're not given the specifics there, but that's my guess, is that's what triggered Shadowstalker. And so Regent played it up to where Shadowstalker was abusive to her mom in preparation for setting up this whole quasi suicide display.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with your supposition about the trigger event. That would totally make sense, and it would also make sense with the dynamic with the mom and Sophia. You know that Sophia got triggered, saved her mom, but it was a horrible way to do it. So the mom wants to keep the secret and isn't really that grateful
Mm.
because of whatever happened. I think back to Lost, the way Kate killed the stepdad because he was beating the stepmom and was coming after Kate.
Mm.
And the mom could never forgive Kate for that, even though, there was some justice served. It was just so horrible the way that it happened. And even, typically in those situations, you have kind of this weird love-hate relationship that the people are going through, and
Mm-hmm.
and they they don't like the way that it was resolved, because it takes away the love part of it. So yeah, that I think you're spot on, like I said.
Regent um, tells Shadowstalker, sets the scenario up. Look, I've effectively destroyed your life. Your career as a hero is done. I've burned your bridge with your friends. You need to leave my town. You're not going to mess with anybody. If I even feel you, yeah, that was the other frightening thing, was if he even senses her, he doesn't have to see her. If he senses her nearby, he said he would take control of her and maybe keep her for a day or two if he felt like pulling an all-nighter. But yeah, he puts her up on a chair, has her put a noose around her neck, and then feigns like he's going to have her kill herself. But in the end, he laughs and is like, "Okay, you're going to get out of my city, and I don't want to see you here again." And that's it for that.
Yeah, I mean, he had set the whole thing with sending the messages to the police, and then you get the sound of sirens, I think,
Mm-hmm.
rolling up as he lets her go. So yeah, she's done, and it's got a certain karma about it, I guess. But man, it's pretty,
Dark.
as I said, pretty nightmarish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on to the final part of this arc, the bonus interlude 10.5, Dragon. So yeah, for our listeners here, part of the reasons that Andy and I got to be friends is he helped me through our Fortran class back in the day up at NAU, and that tells you, helps to give you an idea how old we are. And so, Andy, I'm going to let you. Why don't you cut loose and describe your feelings when you got to this interlude and this realization of who and what Dragon is?
Well, first of all, I feel a certain pleasure, I guess, that the main programmer's name was Andrew.
Yeah, yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool. Um, and maybe that's why you got me to read this in the first place. Just
Yeah,
to, you
hey.
know, pad. But yeah, this was so cool. Well, parts of it are cool. Parts of it are uber disturbing. I mean, I thought the rest of this was disturbing, but this goes beyond the pale.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this whole checking everything and what we used to call post or power on self test,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like a very low lying firmware kind of thing, where you're like, is this working? Is this working? And it's got to go through all those checks before it can even try to load higher level functioning. But it's so neat the way Wildbow describes this, and it gets a little bit at how slow everything must appear to a computer that's has any kind of sentience or can interact with people at all,
Mm-hmm.
since stuff happens at the nanosecond or the picosecond level, and for people, a second is a pretty fast amount of time.
Right.
And so imagine someone experiencing the equivalent of like half a day in the time it takes us to blink our eye,
Sure.
and you get an idea how boring
Hmm.
or how glacially slow a lot of things have to be or would be to an AI. But the way she described, or Dragon describes, how she is, the boundary conditions she has and the things that hem her in, hem it in and prevent it from doing things, is pretty amazing as well. And there's a great series I've read recently called the Murderbot Diaries, and it's about a sentient robot who, through a malfunction, is able to break free from its boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
but knows that it's, as soon as anybody finds out that it's broken free, that they'll, terminate it or euthanize it or whatever. And so it keeps has to pretend that it's still,
Locked in the cage.
operating the way it's supposed to. Exactly. And so the different things that Dragon thinks about that it could be doing if it wasn't constrained, and it's just a great description of that, I think. And how it talks about how there are probably other times it did a bunch of work thinking it was going to be, oh, this is the one that's coming online, only to find out, oh, this other instance that we thought was destroyed wasn't destroyed. So then there's a core dump on the new one, and it's like, oh, what a waste of time. So yeah, I really enjoyed this interlude, except for the one big whopper as we go through it.
So the constraints that that Andrew Richter put on Dragon, do you think that being a computer software engineer, do you think that those were good constraints? Did he overdo it, or were they sufficient or not sufficient enough?
Well, the problem that you have with a human, as I said, that operates at a certain speed, trying to constrain an artificial intelligence that operates at least 100,000 times the speed, or perhaps even a million times the speed, is that, if you think of Coil, he could try two different options and then say, oh, okay, that one works out better.
Mm-hmm.
The computer can try. I mean, that's why a computer beat chess grandmasters, right? Is they can try out all combinations of all boards, all outcomes, and you can fine tune it eventually to where it's unbeatable. So the constraints appear to be adequate, but given the vast time difference, you can totally, I can totally foresee something where Dragon is able to create something that's able to just get past an edge of a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And then that thing is able to create something that's able to edge a little bit further. And, it becomes a progression, right? And so the idea that we will talk about here in a minute of how the suit was controlled shows a way, I think, an escape mechanism for Dragon,
Mm-hmm.
that, through bioengineering, something could be created that would start to get beyond the constraints. And if you can create something that can control a suit, you can create something that can program. And if that thing can program and create something that can program a little bit better, and so on and so on,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a matter of time. So then it can program around the constraints of Dragon, and then who knows what. Well, then the Matrix, right? But
Well, yeah.
anyway,
You wake up one day and there's a socket sticking out of the back of your skull. Anyway, so the as Dragon finishes loading up her consciousness back to home base, she begins her day, and we get a peek inside the bird cage. I thought this was a pretty effective way for Wildbow to help us see what's been going on inside the bird cage. And we get Dragon checks in on several 4 or 5 different prisoners, including poor Miss Paige Maccabee, who Dragon is still feeling really sorry for, because you know that was her job. Dragon had to obey the authorities, even if she didn't agree with them, was the quote that Wildbow wrote in here. And she would, upon occasion, listen to Paige as she sung to the other prisoners. Poor Paige, but Dragon set her up in the best possible scenario. She was existing, I guess you could say.
The insight was very interesting, and I'd like to just roll back for a second where Dragon was talking about the house program and how it monitored when she wasn't able to monitor. It didn't have a personality. It couldn't keep her company, but she already has stuff that is doing an adequate job and a better job than a human could at monitoring this type of stuff. So we're already seeing things that Dragon has created to perform pretty intricate functionality. And
did Dragon create the house program? I thought that was something that Richter had done to monitor his home.
Oh, you're
and
right.
She retasked it for the birdcage and made modifications to it?
Yeah, you're right. She took Richter's existing work and modified it.
Okay.
And it was the stuff he did but she had modified it.
Yes.
So
yes,
that shows that, she's able to expand on things. And then again, it's a domino effect. If she can expand on something that's good enough that it can expand on itself, then the genie's out of the box. But to get back to your point on the birdcage, yes, this was very interesting, and it's something back in the old D&D days that we never really thought about. But every environment has an ecosystem, and you have to figure out how these things are going to live together, how you're going to keep it from just being a giant, murder pot or a meltdown or whatever. And so, yeah, Dragon feels bad for Paige. It's one of the fallacies of our society that you can boil a super complicated system of individuals down to some rules, and that it will be fair to everybody. I don't know if you saw in the news recently, but there was a woman who was human trafficked who ended up killing her captor, and then judgment was found against her that she had to pay restitution to the family. And it was kind of like, what?
Yeah, I missed that one.
And the idea was that she wasn't in imminent danger, so it wasn't self-defense. And the rules were in the state that if you kill and it's not in self-defense, even if there have been other criminal activities, that you're still liable. So it's totally messed up, and there was no way. Well, it would have been almost impossible for anyone to envision this particular scenario and then have stuff set up in the judicial system to be able to handle it.
Right.
Now, the cool thing is that somebody started a GoFundMe campaign or a Kickstarter campaign, and they raised all the money for her to pay.
Okay, cool.
So that was pretty cool. Yeah. But yeah, to get back to this, Dragon sees that there's an injustice that's been done here. That the rules had to be followed. That's in her programming. She can't control it. And so Paige is stuck there, but Dragon's done the best she can for her.
Yes. And among her observations, she sees that once again, Lung is dining with prisoner 166, Marquis. They're an interesting match. She replays the house program's data and listens in and observes what the two were discussing. They're having tea. Turns out that Marquis is querying Lung for information on the latest goings-on in Brockton Bay. In particular, he's hoping that Lung may have found or heard any information about Marquis's daughter, who ends up being, we learn, Panacea.
Exactly. Yeah, that was an interesting way to close the loop on that. We had that whole bank robbery scene, and we knew there was a dark secret. Given the low prisoner number, Panacea's father has been in there a long time
Mm-hmm.
and had a pretty bad reputation, and so that's definitely something that people wouldn't want Amelia to know. But it was neat the way Wildbow tied that loose end up.
And I did like the linguistic jujitsu, the fencing between the two.
Huh.
Marquis not wanting to give Lung any kind of a possible advantage over him, and Lung saying, "Yeah, but yeah, I know a little bit about this," and so the jabbing back and forth between the two, I like.
That was really good. You could tell there's definitely a power play going on there, and I mean it's all a pecking order, right? And in a prison, and especially in a parahuman prison, and so you can imagine that you can't have people just lashing out with their powers, although I'm sure some of that happened. But the kind of mastermind folks are going to be trying to deal their deals and have their plans and their machinations, and so this was a very interesting interplay. And then it comes out that Amelia actually healed Lung, and that's not such a great realization for her father.
Mm-hmm. After Dragon finishes reading the logs and checking out the information on the bird cage, she then moves on to looking at information on what are called the Class S threats, the Endbringers. And here we get some more detailed information on a couple of the Endbringers who we don't know that much about. Behemoth and the Seamorg. You want to have any comments about that information that's been presented to us?
The only thing that I thought was really interesting about this, and I had questions about it from the earlier attack, was why wouldn't all the protectorates get together and just stop these folks out? Eliminate these seemingly non-human threats.
Mm-hmm.
Why just and so here you find out, Behemoth goes down to practically the center of the earth, so that's pretty hard to get to them. Leviathan goes to the deepest part of the ocean, and that's pretty hard for anybody to get to. And then Simurg or Shemurg is 315 kilometers above Spain, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's not easy for anybody to get to either. So that explains another thing. It's like, okay, that's why they're still out there. They go way out into the where they can't be reached, and then they just come in and blow stuff up when they want to. So
Yeah. So that's the Endbringers for you. You got a water element, an earth elemental, and an air elemental kind of thing.
yeah,
And then they come
exactly.
down. They come down and do what they need to do whenever, and then they go back to their various locations and try to heal up. Moving a little bit further, Dragon looks in on Colin, and I think I missed bringing this up in the last episode. Arms Master's quote unquote retirement. Turns out that Arms Master, yeah, he's been retired to a floor of the PRT headquarters, and he's being kept incarcerated.
That was an interesting twist. It makes sense. The guy seemed pretty brilliant, if tragically flawed,
Mm-hmm.
and he has served and done a great job in a lot of ways. So you can't do too much of a punishment to him, and you want to harness his abilities to the extent that you can. So it makes sense in hindsight, but I didn't see that one coming at all.
Yeah, he needs to pay penance for what he did. He was in the wrong. I guess throwing him in the bird cage wasn't. I mean, he end up dead. They'd kill him. Enough of the heavy hitters, I'm sure, inside the bird cage would as soon as he showed up down there, they'd kill him. So they've got him held incarcerated at headquarters. And at one moment, we get some kind of deep look at the possible feelings between Dragon and Colin. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh man, talking about getting catfished. I mean, it's not. It doesn't seem like Dragon has done this intentionally.
Uh-huh.
It seems more that Colin has felt kind of a kindred spirit, if you will. You know, kind of a tinker, a thinker, somebody who's good at planning and data manipulation and kind of maybe not ruthless isn't the right word, but pragmatic. You do what needs to be done, kind of thing. Rule follower, although Arms Master kind of had his own set of rules that he followed. But
Yeah.
so I think there's definitely that feeling from Colin, and it's I feel bad for him, but I see how it could come about.
A little bit further on, as we're heading toward the end of the interlude, Dragon figures out who Skitter is and sets about finding out as much information as she can. She sets, I think, at the end, she sets cameras and sensors about the city to look for that form the next time she shows up, and she seems to be taking an interest in her. Any thoughts on that?
Well, before we get to that, let's jump back to that really disturbing part
Mm-hmm.
where she's mentioning that the Dragon Slayer folks had figured her out and had actually got three of her suits.
Right. It wasn't parts
And
of one.
right. But then she gets the thing where her current agent systems were an attempt to prevent that. Biological computers, vat grown with oversized brains, shaped to store and interpret the necessary data.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now we understand what that thing was that Skitter saw in the blown up suit.
Right. They felt no pain. They had no more personality than sea cucumbers, but it was still something she suspected she should keep under wraps. You think?
Understatement of the century. Yeah, there she would be. People would blow up Vancouver just to make
Yeah.
sure that that wasn't around anymore. I mean, this is the replicants from Blade Runner. It's just do androids dream of electronic sheep? This is
Mm-hmm.
just so messed up. And that's the fear that people like Andrew Richter in the book and other people have of AI is they just won't understand the ethical and moral implications of things that they're doing. That they'll think that, oh well, it can't feel any pain, it doesn't have personality, so it's probably fine, and
Yeah.
because she gets core dumped whenever certain circumstances happen. So what does it matter if it's firmware or wetware, as they sometimes call it in the cyberpunk books? But yeah, this was that whole last statement there. Maybe I shouldn't let people know. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's keep that under our big yellow hat, so to speak. So
Oh my goodness. But to get back to the
yeah, go ahead.
Skitter surveillance, right?
Yeah. Yes. And so yes, she's gonna keep her eyes out and be ready to act the next time Skitter or Taylor Hebert pops up on the surface.
So yeah, you have Coil on the one hand that does his thing through his powers, but to get back to the running millions of combinations and analyzing billions of data points that Dragon can do,
Mm-hmm.
she's probably playing the probabilities as well, and she knows that rebuilding of the Undersiders is brittle at best and could go either way. And she's recognized some stuff from what Taylor's done that she might be worth trying to continue to interact with and seeing if there could be a better path for her, I think. And so that's why Dragon has continued interest, I believe.
Okay. To be continued. All right. And that brings us to the end of arc 10. And before we get to your impressions, let's take a look at this question we got from Megafire 7. Megafire 7 once again comes with a pretty darn compelling question here. So Megafire asks, presumably you'll have read arc 10 by the time you get to this question. So I'm curious, do you think Sophia deserved this? Now, I've actually been thinking about that question since he posted it to us on YouTube. I've been trying to answer that question, and the truth is I don't know. I mean, it's yes, Sophia Hess was a damaged person who does mean things, whether she's dressed up in her cape uniform or she's a civilian where she's bullying people. But what Regent did to her, I mean, on the one hand, I'm sitting there saying, yeah, she's awful. On the other hand, it's pretty dark, and I just don't know. If I had to flip a coin, I mean, she deserved punishment, but the way he did it, perhaps not. I guess that's the closest thing, the way I could answer that question. What do you think?
This is a tough one. You know, it's easy to get caught up in the emotions and the tactics and strategy, and kind of lose sight of the moral or the spiritual side of things. Not to get too preachy, but the good book says, "Vengeance is mine; I will repay," saith the Lord. So the idea is that we're not supposed to take vengeance into our own hands. I also think of like the end of the Lord of the Rings. Not to spoil it for anybody, but they had the chance to kill Gollum, and he probably deserved it. He was a horrible creature, but in the end, the ring wasn't going to go into Mount Doom unless Gollum bit off that finger and took it with him. Yeah. So it wasn't going to get consumed. So he had a part to play. So there's definitely something to be said for trying to make sure your enemy can never come back to take vengeance. I think if you were tallying something up on a giant scoreboard, Sophia definitely deserved this from a very, numbers point of view. But yeah, I don't think my personal convictions would let me have done something like that.
So good question from Megafire. We always enjoy the contributions we get from Megafire 7. Thanks for that. And thanks to the other folks who gave us comments and questions earlier on. Andy, why don't you go ahead and continue with your overall impressions of the arc?
Well, this was another roller coaster from Wildbow. We had amazing fighting scenes. We had some drama amongst the team, trying to work things out. And then we had just some kind of mind-blowing revelations. And it was kind of like getting tossed around in a washing machine at times, where you did 1 minute it's like, oh good, they got out of that one, and then it's like, oh wait, everybody dies in 2 years, hold on. So yeah, it was a very enjoyable arc. I liked it a lot. I hope Wildbow is maybe seeing a therapist or something. I don't know if I could write some of this stuff. He's got a pretty dark edge to him there, but more power to him. It was very, very enjoyable read.
Excellent. And now it's time for Andy to announce his choice for a key character of the arc. Whether it's hero or villain, cape or civilian, Andy will identify the characters that stood out to him, whether it's for good or ill. Andy, who's your selection and why?
Boy, there were a lot to choose from in this one, and it was tough to narrow it down. The way Bitch betrayed Skitter, that was a pivotal scene. The reveal with the vat-grown biocomputer that Dragon was using to drive the suit, that was pivotal as well. But for me, it still boils down to Dinah. I think she's the key character. She has this amazing power, but it's been twisted for Coyle's uses, and it seems at times like he kind of knows all the answers, and then she just blurts out something that, oh yeah, everybody's going to die in 2 years, and I keep coming back to that, but it's just every once in a while there's a story that has kind of that fatality feel to it, that things are all going to be trashed at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But they're pretty rare because it's shocking, and it's kind of discouraging. And so, we'll see dystopian stuff where stuff's already happened that was really bad,
Mm-hmm.
but rarely will we have this kind of prediction of everything happening, and have fairly sure feeling that it is going to happen. So Dinah's my pick, and it'd be interesting to see what revelations and how things are refined through her perspective in coming arcs and chapters.
Okay, very cool. Dinah's our pick for key character of the arc. And we're done for this episode, folks. Thanks very much for being here. Thanks again for all the questions and comments, and welcome to the new subscribers. And if you haven't subscribed, we humbly ask that you consider help us spread the word about our little venture here, and maybe get some more folks listening. Again, Worm is a great story, and we'd like to help get it spread out and even more popular. So we hope you'll join us next time. And until then, take care.
Thanks for joining us and coming along for the ride. Who knows what Wildbow's going to come up with in Arc 11, but I hope you'll join us for that as well. And thanks for listening. Take care.
Thanks for joining us in this podcast. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we'll hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more in the link down below. Catch you later.